You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have
But you're not eating food at all. Nowadays, what you have is processed food and genetically modified foods, and these are not actually foods at all. So we want to bring our sister to the stage so we can go a little bit more. Please give our sister Naasah X Henderson a round of applause. Okay, you're going to mic her up, and I'll bring her on up. All right, he's micing her up, and as soon as she comes up, we'll get right on into that. Listen to very closely to what our sister has to say, because, like I said, brothers and sisters, somebody's trying to kill us, and that's real.
Good afternoon, family. It's good to be here. Because I have some information I'd like to share, and I put it in my notes, some of it. RD said so much of it so well that I don't really have to enumerate on it much, but I just want to start right there with what he said about us being lazy. And I don't want us to get the wrong idea when we think about that adjective. What he's really trying to say is that when we see someone that's overweight in our community or that has diabetes as a result of being overweight, we don't think about it because we come from a culture where food is so celebrated. We think about how long we were enslaved in this country and how much importance is put on us eating together as a family, and how much we think of our grandmother's pound cake and our aunt's macaroni and cheese, and we don't want to let go of those things. I don't want to let go of the memory of my Uncle Guy roasting that pig in my grandfather's front yard, but I gotta let it go, folks. I gotta let it go because I care about my community. I came to say that to you today, and I hope you don't get too upset with me because troubling emotions are bad for the immune system, and that's the antithesis of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring a little health to myself and my community by speaking with you today. When RD talked about societies that maybe had to walk a long way to gather food, we don't find fatness, and we don't find homicide, we don't find psychosis in those communities. And I'm talking about the community in Tanzania right now where people still walk 5 to 15 miles a day to eat.
Right.
And as they're walking, they don't have a selection of McDonald's and Burger King and all the fast food places that we see in America and that are now illuminated to us throughout the world as the world takes on our practice of overeating and eating quickly. What we see is people walking 5 miles to dig in the ground and eat a few twigs and eat a few tubers, and then they come back home, and they do this every day. They squat down, like RD talked about, they dig in the ground, they eat a little bit of berries, and they eat honey. They don't eat sugar. They don't eat white sugar, they don't eat raw sugar, they don't eat sugar cane, they don't have access to those kind of things, but we do. So basically, if we're thinking about food today, we have to wonder if our eating today has a lot to do with addiction, which is really prominent in our community.
Right, that's right.
When we eat, we think of happy things, we associate it with being happy. Therefore, it releases something called serotonin into our brain. It gives us that feeling of being high. It's a dopamine rush. So every time we see some food, whether we're hungry or not, we pick it up and we want to eat it.
Right.
If we're going to do that, if we're going to eat something every chance we get, we're not going to give our digestive system the chance to relax. So therefore, we're not going to be healthy anymore. You think about from coming from the the viewpoint of a nurse, I think about the epithelial tissues that encapsulate our cells, and we can't get new cells if our cells are not releasing something called nitric oxide. And they can't do that if we're eating foods that are contaminated with glyphosate, for instance.
Come on.
Unfortunately, in Ohio, we have to be privy to foods that come directly from Monsanto. Monsanto has not only contaminated Ohio, but it's contaminated the world. In 2006, glyphosate was banned in many countries, and Monsanto lost its patent in 2006, and Bayer picked it up. So therefore, we still are finding that the food industry uses GMOs to increase the yield of food. So really what I want to ask you today is to change your mind about what you eat. I want you to start thinking about looking at the labels. It sounds a little overpowering right now to ask you to give up meat altogether, but I'm saying that if a cow can roam, just like RD just shared with us, if it can roam and get this humongous amount of muscle and a healthy amount of fat on its body from just eating grass, I don't know why we don't think we can eat a few vegetables and seeds and fruit and sustain ourselves.
Right.
I don't know about you, but I used to cry the blues a lot. Have you ever cried the blues? We tend to cry the blues about our own selves and about our community. And living in Dayton, Ohio right now is very hard for us because we think about what happened last weekend. What was it? Yeah, last weekend. About a week ago in the community down in the Oregon district. And it has to do with being at the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm asking us again not to eat the wrong foods, not to be at the wrong place at the wrong time in this country at this time.
Right.
Because just about 90% of our community, of the red and brown community, is already pre-diabetic. And that's because of the food choices we have. So again, I'm asking you to step out of your comfort zone and spend a little more money when you're at the store. I'm asking you to walk around the perimeter of a market that sells whole foods. I'm asking you not to venture into the center of the store where the boxes are. I'm asking you to stay on the edge where your pocket's going to be a little more squeezed when you buy those pomegranates and those organic pears or the organic cabbage, the brown rice. I'm asking you to do those things for your children and for the generations to come, because if you don't, we won't have any generations.
That's right.
I think about all the times that we probably were told to look for a reward in heaven, but I'm asking you to step into heaven right now. That's what I'm asking you, is to find yourself in paradise today by making those kind of healthy choices that you deserve and that your children deserve and that your parents deserve. I'm asking you not to follow those doctor's orders so carefully. And you're hearing that from a health professional that has to struggle every shift not to hand out all of those simvastatins and all of that Tylenol and all of that ibuprofen that I know is poisoning everyone's kidneys and everyone's liver. And I'm asking you to do that from the standpoint of someone that knows that I do it for a living and I suffer with it, I struggle with it, but I have 2 children in college. So what I'm going to do, I raise them by myself. I make money as a nurse. I hand this poison out to people who willingly accept it, but I'm asking you not to. I'm telling you that food will save you or food will kill you. And that's what it's doing to us right now. There's something called epigenetics. When RD talked about us being one of the strongest nations of people in the world, we already know that. I hope we do. If not, let's open our eyes and see that. We don't have to look too far. But when you talk about epigenetics, what that does is that turns on a gene in the body that creates cancer and disorder and disease. So if you continue to eat these foods that are easy on the pocket and that grandma's been giving you since 1960 or whatever, then you're asking for a lot of trouble. You don't have to suffer the amputations, and you don't have to suffer the heart attacks, and we don't have to get Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm saying that from a person who buried her mother after 15 years of Alzheimer's, because all my mother ever did was eat her own pound cake. She didn't want to eat the greens and the beans and all the stuff she cooked for us. She just wanted pound cake. keeps making me go back to that subject of sugar. Sugar is a drug. It is the #1 drug in the world. And if you don't believe me, not only can you Google it, you can go and research it anywhere and you'll find that it's true. There was a study done in 1965, which was kind of squelched by Coca-Cola, actually. They didn't want anybody to talk about sugar back then. They wanted to say that saturated fat was the demon, but that's really not true. In 1980, a group of scientists got together and dug through the archive, and they found out that people have been knowing that it's sugar that raises triglycerides, not fat. So, if you would substitute the vegetable oil that you're getting from Save-A-Lot, perhaps, read the label, maybe transfer to something like avocado oil or olive oil. Just tweak your diet little bits at a time. Just like with the exercise regimen, eating is also an exercise. So much is centered around eating. Let me talk about the people in Tanzania for a minute, called the Naasah. When I say that they're traveling 15 miles back and forth to eat, that's not an exaggeration. Basically, I think about walking up and down the halls every night at work, and I'm probably walking 15 to 20 miles every night. But that didn't stop my weight from getting up to about 201 about 4 or 5 years ago. And this after a life of, in the gym, bodybuilding and all that. I just fell apart. And I fell apart because I began to eat for happiness. I just picked up a brownie in the kitchen or whatever. I associated my feelings with food. I also was a very emotional person and very unhappy. Again, crying the blues. So what I began to do was I took my passion for research and for knowledge and health and beauty and all of those things and put it together in this licensure that I now call a health advocate. What I am is a health coach. So I work on my weight and my life constantly. It's not something that happens magically. It's not something that I was really born with. I guess I had some good genes, supposedly, but that all can fall apart in the twinkling of an eye. Not to mention neuropathy can happen overnight. About 10% of the patients that I see every day are missing limbs, and these are people from other heritages that I never would have thought. People, Japanese people, Hawaiian people, Chinese people. I never would have thought I would see that in the community, but what it is that they've taken on a SAD diet, which is the Standard American Diet. That's what that acronym is for. Another sister that noticed something like that was Michelle Obama. When she got in office with her husband, she goes and she tells the dudes up there, she's like, wow, we've really got to move on this food you're feeding our people. We've got to really move. Let's move on this right away. And they say, well, we don't want you to say that. What we want to do is we want to take those 2 words, really 3, let us move on this, became Let's Move, and she sent it into the school systems. And my children, many of my children went to Stivers, but I've got 2 in the audience right now, and they hated when Michelle Obama instituted this thing where they took all the snack machines out of the school, and they had to eat this crazy kind of preserved diet that wasn't being cooked in the cafeteria, but was supposed to be like healthier, but yet there was really nothing to eat. So they kind of starved all day. What I posed to them is that basically they were fasting, and that's not too bad. Fasting is a very strong tool for healing. So I guess I would mention that if we didn't eat as much meat, and if we fasted a little more, and if we walked a little more, I think we would be a little healthier. So basically I came here today to ask us to do that. Because I want to uplift our community, and I wanted to talk about the serotonin and the dopamine and the epigenetics and the walking, and give you some clues. I mean, did you know that a new heart, you grow a new heart about every 20 years because of your cells, and that because you have cells, you get new bones about every 10 years, and you get new hair about every 3 to 6 years, and new nails every 6 to 10 months, and new red blood cells about every 4 months, and you get a new liver about every 5 months, believe it or not, and a new epidermis every month, new lungs every 3 weeks. basically have a new set of lungs and new taste buds every 2 weeks and a new stomach lining every 2 or 3 days. But that's not going to happen on McDonald's, Long John Silver's, Coca-Cola, Hershey's, Mars candy bars, Post cereal, Kellogg's. It's not going to happen. Kentucky Fried Chicken. If I say anything about those people, I'd have to talk about the history of those people. And during the Civil War, there was this doctor, Dr. Pemberton. He was a doctor during the Civil War, and he survived, but not without stomach cancer. He had a lot of pain. So he became very addicted to morphine. So as he's sitting there drinking his morphine and his wine, and he decides that the cocoa plant, man, that's really good for you. That makes your brain clear. And that little leaf that they chew down in South America, that gives you a lot of energy. And we really don't have any food. Everything's blown away and there's no food and the meat we have is rotten. So, hey, I'll come up with this formula. People will sip this and they won't be as hungry. But then this other guy named Asa Candler finds out his formula and he steals it from him and he comes up with Coca-Cola and later becomes the richest man to ever grace Atlanta, Georgia. And he was the mayor of Atlanta at one time. So because there was so much power associated with Coca-Cola, we have been force-fed sugar, people. And I'm asking you to stop it today. I can stand here as an ex-alcoholic, someone who had to drink a fifth of gin every day just to teach school, just to raise my children. And I am a success story because I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to weigh 200 pounds anymore. I don't have to eat when I don't need to eat anymore. I don't have to feel like, oh, my stomach's growling. Let me eat something. Let me just eat anything. That's not true because I'm not chopping cotton. And I'm not chopping sugar cane. I'm not burning that amount of calories that would allow me to eat something poison like the slaves did when they were eating all that pork and all those weeds out the yard. I don't have to eat that way anymore. I don't have to think the way I used to think. And I'm just asking us to change today, basically. You know, I got a lot of notes here and a lot of beautiful words. I meant to say them right, but feel me, because beauty is deep.
Yeah.
Any questions? Anything?
I got a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, Brother Steve.
Processed foods. Processed food.
Processed
Can
food.
you talk about how, I guess, wide-ranging they are, and how can we avoid eating processed foods?
Okay, so we don't want to believe when we see something that says zero fat. You want to turn it over and you want to read the labels, which is why I say if you would avoid that part of the supermarket where the boxes are kept. You won't say, oh my God, I've got 4 grandkids with me today. I really don't feel like hearing them fuss. I really don't feel like reading the label. But you really need to read it because sugar is not only in the little packets or the raw terminado sugar and all of that. It's not just that. It's also high fructose corn syrup. So we want to avoid high fructose corn syrup. We want to avoid any corn products. All of that is processed. We want to avoid tilapia fish because they're fed corn. And I mean, if I say that, I'm sure that, you know, I'm offending the senses of people who make their money cooking, especially in big kitchens across the world, because tilapia is readily available in farms. But what they feed those fish is corn, and corn is glyphosate ridden, just like 60% of our rain. Even when I'm eating organic food, I wash it off because I know that the rain that fell on it is full of glyphosate. Even if I went to Mississippi or Louisiana right now, I'd be looking at 90% of the runoff from Monsanto's chemicals are stored right there in the water in the Mississippi. So processed food is food that's grounded up as ground beef in the store. We don't know where it came from in those tubes. That's a processed food. Food that has high fructose corn syrup in it. Food that has canola. Canola is an oil that's processed here in America and Canada. So Canada is full of canola fields. It's not safe because it's full of glyphosate. And when you think about glyphosate, you really should be offended because glyphosate is a product of something that's called Agent Orange, and Agent Orange killed a lot of people during Vietnam and created cancer. And where Agent Orange came from was when the Nazi regime was prominent. They came up with that product, later became Agent Orange, which later became glyphosate. So when you do the research, which is what I'm advocating that we do, you don't have to buy into anything I'm saying, but the internet is right there, and that's a necessary demon, evidently. So hey, get on there and start digging out some information, start doing the research for yourself. But salt, just when you buy iodized salt in the store, just because it says Hanes on it, Hains. It's a company that's labeled as a health food company. That doesn't mean that's true. Most of the salt that's gathered is full of plastic because the ocean is so polluted from plastic. So you just have to be careful of everything that you buy, Brother Steve.
We got just 2 more minutes. Can you talk about genetically modified foods?
Genetically modified foods come about from the process of using glyphosate. For one, what it does is it creates an environment in the corn. Not only corn, asparagus, peppers. It makes the bugs not want to eat it. So that's what it's about. It's a genetically modified food that will turn a bug off or get in his stomach and kill him. So when everybody that's running around suffering from IBS wonders why, it's because the protein from your food is leaking into your gut because you're ingesting something that was meant to kill a bug. It's meant to kill a bug. So when you eat a McDonald's fry, you're eating an Idaho potato, which is engineered to be perfect so that the fry is straight. Just get an ugly red potato.
That's right.
Or grow one, or buy one at the farmer's market. Just change your thought process about food, is what I'm saying. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so artificial meat, artificial protein sources, is that what you mean? Okay, that's true. Some are. There was a company that everybody used to clamor to, Morningstar, a couple years ago, which were found to be fraudulent because they were using products that were not really organic. So be careful about that. You can use a product that's, if it says certified organic, it should have the 3 little leaves on the back. You should be able to look it up for efficacy, and it shouldn't just be the front of the packaging that you're looking at. You need to look at the entire box. You need to see that it is USDF, if you're in this country, certified as organic. But just because it's a vegetarian product that does not mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's a good bread. It doesn't mean that it's a good protein source. Just because it's salmon doesn't mean it's organic salmon. They could have colored the meat to make it pink. They're starting to farm a lot of salmon, and unfortunately, it's horrific to think about, but 90% of the salmon that we get in the U.S. is actually from a lab, just a lab full of big boiling ponds of fish that they actually make in the lab. They're like test tube fish. So it's really sad and it's frightening to know that the food industry has poisoned our world to this point. So let's be aware and let's do research and get informed and get moving. Drink some water, guys. Not tap water. All right. Thank you so much. Praise be to God.
Let's give it up one more time for Sister Naasah X Henderson. Very powerful. Very powerful. Thank you, Sister.